Hello, I'm Andy Robinson, Chair of the Institute of Innovation, Senior Vice President with ICF. Welcome to our first Institute of Innovation workshop. We're so happy to have Rob Shelton here this afternoon. Ann Armstrong, Sarah, and I were discussing innovation and how most people think that it's just a concept. Then brought to their attention a book which is being used in B schools all over the world titled Making Innovation Work, which Rob co-authored, and I'd come across that. So we decided to invite Rob here to DC to hear more about his work. So we're very fortunate to have Rob here with us today. I want to thank FCW, Troy Schneider, Editor-in-Chief in particular, for his continued support as our media partner with the Institute of Innovation. So what is the Institute of Innovation? Have any of you participated in a project or an event? When I raise my hand, that's a cue for you to raise your hand. Thank you very much. Very good. Just waking you up a little bit here. Let me give you some background on the Institute. It was founded in 2011 to promote innovation and delivery of government services and operations. The charter is deliver high-quality strategic advice that reflects cross-industry recommendations based on experts from member companies and government liaisons. Major projects to date include the 6 papers written for the Quadrennial Government Technology Review, the recent paper for OMB on transforming the way government builds solutions, the Igniting Innovation Showcase and Award that recognized 30 finalists at the Ronald Reagan Center last February, actually, and where almost 700 government and industry attendees used social networking to select the winner. And I think that was the most covered ACT-IAC event by the media ever, including ELCs, et cetera. So that was a very successful event for the Institute. We'll be calling on nominations for that in September, I believe, of this year, so be ready for that. And there's also sponsorship opportunities for that event as well. Actually, tonight, our advisors will hear more about several new potential projects, and if they are approved, we will seek volunteers from our membership. Watch for those announcement topics include cyber, citizen-centric services, and others. I want to thank our patrons that sponsor the Institute. MITRE, our research partner, the Ambit Group, Amazon Web Services, AT&T, ICF, and Microsoft. Talk to Sarah DiCarlo. Sarah, I think everyone knows you, but just in case, if you want a sponsorship and get involved with the Institute, talk with Sarah. CEUs, and this goes for PDUs as well. You must do 2 things to get your credit for today if you have a certification you need to keep up to date. Complete and sign and provide your email address. That's not optional, for the purpose of the course evaluation. And then you must provide 100 words on and identify the 7 rules. You can focus on 1 and 2 that represents the biggest challenge to innovation, and write no more than 100 words on that and provide an action plan. And you'll send some clarifying comments on that?
Yeah. Once they give me their email address, they'll get something, and when you send it back, then we'll go.
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Ann Armstrong. Ann's going to provide a few comments on innovation in government to set the stage for the rest of the afternoon. Ann serves as co-president and chief content officer for the 1105 Public Sector Media Group. For 6 media properties, actually. She served as president of Virginia's Center for Innovative Technology from 1999 to August 2002. She's a graduate of Vanderbilt and Hopkins, and she's deceptively long on the golf course as well. So, Ann, if you will. Chance to say something nice.
Oh, okay. And in this collaborative approach, Andy said this is a really good time for me to say something nice about his golf game. And he has a wonderful game between the fairway and the green. Is that fair? Yeah. This is going to be really short. It's just, we all know that innovation is difficult even in lean and agile enterprises. But in government, the task can be daunting. A large bureaucracy, by its sheer mass, can be difficult to turn. But when you add laws, legal restrictions, and a reward system that seems to prefer the status quo, innovation can be rare indeed. But even in hostile environments, there are pockets of innovation. DARPA has a 50-year history of turning out practical ideas such as the internet, drones, GPS, just to name a few. Now, they've created sort of a special environment to make that happen. There are other standouts, however: NASA, USAID's Global Development Lab, and the newly debuted 18F at GSA. And we saw 30 practical examples in February of how agencies are innovating in the Igniting Innovation Awards program. So there are a number of other agencies, including the winner, EPA, that we could add to that innovation list. So today we're looking for some of the secrets of success that we can learn to help agencies master the art of innovation. And now I believe Troy is going to introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Troy Schneider. I'm the editor of FCW, and we're very happy to be part of this event today. It's my pleasure to introduce Rob Shelton, who is the Global Innovation Strategy Lead at PwC and specializes in exactly what we're talking about today: identifying the right business models, technologies, and other levers that large organizations can use to bring innovation into their existing operations and improve their strategic planning. Rob's based in Silicon Valley, where he also co-founded and continues to guide one of the Valley's leading business incubators. He also sits on the advisory board of Points of Light, which is a social incubator. He's helped more than 100 global firms build the systems to better innovate and consulted for federal agencies, the EU, and the state of California. And as Andy mentioned before, Rob has literally written or co-written the book on what we're talking about today. I hope you read the excerpt, which was in the May 15th issue of FCW, May 30th issue, sorry. But you really should get the full book. It's well worth the read, and I think we'll learn a lot about that today. Mentioned the need to write your 100 words. The FCW excerpt has 5 of the 7 points in it, so you do need to pay attention. But with that, please welcome Rob Shelton, who will be guiding our discussions today.
Hello. There's a large amount of electrical equipment here right where I was going to put my water, so I think I'm going to put it up here instead for about a bit. Excuse me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the introduction. I am incensed about innovation. I spend a large amount of time. On the other hand, I don't think that innovation is always the answer to everything. I'm reminded as I drive to work sometimes that there are some very innovative approaches towards driving down the freeway that I just, in fact, wish wouldn't happen. And I'd like to, so I just wanted to establish immediately with you that innovation is not the answer. It's not something you do all of the time, anytime. In fact, I'll show you that those that are best at it, in fact, are thoughtful. And they're sort of disciplined, as opposed to being sort of rampantly involved with innovation at all times. So let me move us forward. I am going to draw from the book today, and I'll start off with how we got started. My co-author is Tony Davila, who teaches at Stanford University Business School. Mark Epstein, who at the time was at Harvard, he was a visiting scholar. We were looking at the fact that there were a lot of great books about sort of the strategy of innovation and the need for it. And both of those are important, but there wasn't a clear approach on how to really make it work. So when we started doing this, we asked ourselves 3 questions that seemed most prominent among practitioners, which is how do leaders really establish a meaningful innovation program, public sector, private sector, and then how do they sustain it? That last part's important because the next thing we realized is that many companies do it, but have trouble sustaining it. Companies I was pointing to at the time, but the truth is any organization can have a wonderful aspect of innovation for a period of time. Sustaining it turns out to be a challenge. Why is that? It's an important question. The last one is, if they don't sustain it, we found a lot of evidence that said some had trouble ever regaining it. And their history, so to speak, or they're less effective than they could be had they sustained it. So what is it that makes it particularly difficult, or at least is a challenge? For someone that had great innovation capabilities, you'd think it would be like remembering how to ride a bicycle. But in fact, it isn't always that case. So those were the questions that prompted us. Now, I'm not going to just answer the questions. I thought I'd show you what we learned, particularly about what makes the leaders tick. What is it that allows them to do this and sustain it? By the way, I'm going to show slides. Afterward, if you give Sarah your card, we'll send you copies of the slides. Let's not print if we don't have to. I got a lot of slides in here. We don't want to do that. But some of them are just builds as opposed to, I tried to give you PowerPoint that really is a text that I just happen to throw into PowerPoint format. So we'll go through that. But just an aside, you might want to pay attention to the 7, just because I understand there's, if not a test, there's a written thing. And the other question I had is, do I get credit too if I can list the 7? All right. Now I know we're playing on a level playing ground. That's good. First off, innovation's creating and delivering new value. There are many definitions, but that one works extremely well. And it results in organic business growth if you're a corporation, or enhanced capacity to fulfill a mission if you're an agency, government entity. Worked in both, I understand. There are important differences. But interestingly, innovation both thrives and doesn't in organizations, whether they're public sector or private sector, for the same reasons. The missions, the objectives can be different. But innovation's new value. And it means just not new ideas, it means delivered value. So that's the important part. A lot of folks are great at idea generation, but not so good at delivery. Now, you wouldn't happen to know any of those organizations, but let me promise you that they do exist. And many companies or organizations and governments, organizations and companies are frustrated by the fact that they seem to have great ideas, but they don't come to fruition. They are not brought forward to improve the ability to deliver on the mission or to drive growth. And by the way, just so you know, this isn't just revenue growth. I realize that there are folks here that do have P&Ls and worry about these things. It could be revenue growth, it could be margins, it could be competitive position, it could be ability to attract and retain the best talent. But improving, that's what growth here means. So just to be clear, I'm talking about any and all of those. And enhanced capacity to fulfill our mission is everything from talent to process to increased technology, et cetera, technologies that deliver on that. So I won't stumble around too much more, but I just want to make, does that seem like a good working definition? Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay, well, we'll go forward from there, because with that as a foundation, we can talk about how to do it. Now, first let me talk about why it's difficult. And it's, by the way, this is something that has been reinforced over and over and over again, which is innovation's difficult in part because of historical reality. For the past 10 to 20 years, depending upon which part of the government you're in or which industry you're in, or whatever, people have been focused on operational excellence. And that's wonderful. Better, faster, taking out the waste, cost cutting. All of these things are extremely important. Just sort of working with what you have and doing better with it. But part of the challenge is that operational excellence has a set of skills, metrics, processes, even talent that aren't the same as you use for innovation. For instance, business operations, and I'm choosing business here because it's sort of that, this was what the book talked about primarily, are geared to stable, predictable, repeatable situations. I mean, that's how they were growing up, and that's how they've developed. If you sit in a management meeting, I don't care what it is, whether it's public sector or private sector, you will hear primarily discussion about What improvement did we make? Did we solve the problem? Did we fix things? Did we make them a little better around what already exists today? The metrics of performance, the processes that are used, the time spent by management is all around that. There's almost nothing about what new products, services, capabilities were launched. And I've listened to this happen time and time again. There are brief episodes where, this is our month to talk innovation and it happens. But on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, organizations have been primarily focused on the operational side. Now that creates a certain, as I said, skewing of the capabilities, the processes, and the like. Innovation requires, as I'll show you in a second, experimentation in dealing with uncertainty. And these are qualities that most operationally focused companies want to avoid. So you don't want to experiment too much. If it works, don't mess with it. If it doesn't work, fix it, but let's not play around too much. Get it done now. But innovation requires a slightly different clock speed and approach in order to make it work. And I'll give you many details in a second. But innovation success, as a result, requires a slightly different management approach, new decision frameworks and approaches. Not radically different, as then you need to separate innovation from operational excellence. In fact, the best organizations, DARPA was mentioned as a leader in that regard. There are companies, I'll mention one because it's known, Apple, do a great job these days of balancing operations as well as this innovation capability. So it's not as though you have a operationally focused group and an innovation group. The truth is that there's an ambidexterity in the companies that are really good at it. Those that aren't tend to be really good at operations, but it's hard to grow the innovation capability inside. We'll talk about what it means to grow that. Central message of MIW, making innovation work, I'll use that abbreviation all the way through, is how you innovate determines what you innovate. Now, this is not some Zen-like statement. What it boils down to is what we found was quite amazing. The processes that you use for innovation actually have an effect on the type of innovation you get. That is, it's a path function if you're a physicist or you deal in the sciences or things. The process, the way it's developed and brought forward actually impacts its ultimate end state, its viability and the like. So as you'll see, some things in innovation are really good for small incremental improvements. Take the cost out of this, make it a little bit more user-friendly, make it something you can see without your glasses because people over 40 are using it. Things like this, aspects that can be done, small incremental improvement. The processes you use to do that are different than the one where you would say, create something via gestures. So that there was something on the lectern here where all I needed to do was go like that. Whole different technology, a lot of unknowns. By the way, we're only about that far from that right now. And your computers will soon be using that, I can promise you. Since I live in the Valley, I see these things all the time. But that's a different process. That's got a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, and you're dealing with different technologies, but also different business models, because this Logitech item, I know the company quite well, I can sell that through channels. What am I going to sell through lectern channels? I mean, it's a different business model altogether. So you see, as soon as you start doing something bold and new, you're in whole new territory. And I'll come back to that again. That's good, but it means it takes a little different ability to navigate your way through and be successful and make it out alive. Because some people enter the innovation space and never come out again. Breakthroughs require a different approach. As I've said, incremental is easy, but if you're going to go do something really fantastically different, you have to explore what you don't know. And I'm telling you, these are keys to success. These aren't one of the 7 elements, but moving fast and being agile are important. If you're just making improvements in what exists, you can be sort of methodical and logical and manage your risks in your investment. Return on investment makes sense. But if you're trying to do something entirely brand new, you've got to scurry because you're not really sure what the answer looks like. If you move slowly, you may never find it. And you need to experiment and learn. I'm going to come back to that. Experimentation and learning is at the heart of breakthrough innovation. And I thought we had a big breakthrough in the Valley when we moved to what you call the lean startup. It's a common term. These days were rapid prototyping, and truth is, we had been doing it earlier than that because we realized that this was a challenge. DARPA actually was one of the first ones to say, because I was at SRI for years, so Stanford Research Institute, where the mouse came from, and the GUI, and all kinds of different things. Siri actually came out of DARPA stuff having to do with voice recognition and all these kinds of things. The reality is that when you're trying to do something really new, you have to try and experiment. So it's been around for a while, but then I realized that that's what Thomas Edison did, too. I mean, he tried lots of things. If you look at his notebooks, the most famous one is on the light bulb, the tungsten, how he went through like 87, or maybe it was 187 different elements before, horsehair. He was trying anything and everything to try and find the right material. That experimentation, that learning was great. He said, if I try 10,000 things and they don't work, I am not upset or depressed. I'm paraphrasing him. He said, because now I know what doesn't work and I know where to go next. So that mindset's important, and it's true even in incremental innovation. Don't be afraid of experimenting as long as it's fast and it's agile and you're on the right path. So one of the hallmarks of breakthrough innovation is inquisitiveness. You want people, you want processes that inquire, they challenge. I'm not talking about crazies that run up and down the hall. I'm talking about an honest intellectual desire to understand how things work and how to make them better. Being excited about testing new ideas and experimenting is what inquisitiveness is all about, because experimenting, a la Edison, means you're on the path to doing something new. Just sticking with what you have, again, that's an important part. The operations, you got to get the job done day to day. But some part of some people's lives need to be spent inquiring and doing it, and not in a haphazard or unstructured way. That's not sustainable. It's an interesting thing to do, but in the long run, your organization doesn't want it. It's a hobby. What we want to do is make it part of your professional activity. Innovative people and companies and organizations experiment a lot. And this is something that, and here I'll go to someone who was much more erudite than Edison. Edison was brilliant. I love him. But Enrico Fermi, who had to be one of the smartest people that ever has been around, said, you got to experiment. And when you experiment, you have two possible outcomes. If you have a hypothesis and you tested it in an experiment, and it works the way you expected, you have data. But if you, wait a second, there we go. If the results don't match your hypothesis, you have a discovery. This was the Edison thing. So sometimes the discovery is that doesn't work. Every so often, that's exactly what will work. So this idea of experimentation is at the heart of what makes innovation work. Now, I will pause here in just a moment. The amazing thing about innovation is that we are doing a better job at it today than we used to. I mean, yes, Edison was a forerunner, but not everyone has been using that Edisonian approach towards prototyping. Now we're sort of realizing it's mainstream, and leading organizations are doing it. But we have been honestly innovating the way we innovate for the past 10 or so years. So the book, Making Innovation Work, was meant to capture what is it that in fact makes it that we've learned. Because we were good on stage gate incremental innovation for a long time post-World War II, but the rules have changed, and we've figured out how to do it better. And we've tried, and in our own experimentation, we've tried and had some data and had some discoveries, and now we're actually doing it better. So what I'm going to share with you are some of the most leading edge practices, including some work from a survey we just did of 1,757 executives in 25 countries across 30 different portions of business that will show you where things are going. So growth and adaptation require processes that systematically experiment. So that's it, systematically experiment. Do you have in your organization the room for the right people to be able to systematically experiment, learn, generate data, generate discoveries? It's a key question if you're doing a diagnostic. I'll give you some more things to look for, but that is one of the hallmarks of successful innovators, is this ability to do it repeatedly and scalably. Those are the things that companies are striving for now, is repeatability and scalability. Can we make it happen across wide parts of the organization, the whole agency? Can we do it in a repeatable fashion so that we have a steady flow of appropriate innovations? Second point, technology and business model define innovation. There's a strong tendency to say innovation is technology, and I realize some of you are strong IT proponents and the like, and it's absolutely the backbone of a great deal of innovation, particularly for service organizations that deliver services. It has been and will continue to be. But that's not the only technology, and it's not as though technology alone is the factor that you need to think about. The technology that there we go. Technology of the products and services, technology is embedded in products and services. Also in the processes, the way that you actually take things out there. I mean, your ability to deliver the services from an agency to meet your mission, to deliver products or services is a very important part. The processes that make them and do it are critical. Supporting technologies are also important. In some organizations, quality control is extremely important. Innovating the way that you do quality control, or inventorying the services and how well people are satisfied with them. If you can do that much better than others, then you can make a significant advancement over the way you have done it. So those are the three on the technology side. And there's large amounts, but the taxonomy is important. But realize that the business model, and don't let the word business throw you off if you're in public sector. It's just a terminology. Let me describe what business model is. It's the value you deliver. What is it that you're providing to your customers? The next one is the value network. How do you deliver it, and how do you receive payback? As in continued funding, or revenue if you're a private sector company, and then who do you deliver it to? So what value, how do you deliver it, how do you get payback, and who do you sell to? If you make innovations in any of those areas, it can be extremely powerful. So sometimes technology is in the forefront and there are minor tweaks. Sometimes the business model is. One of my favorite stories, and this will be private sector, but I love it because it captures so much. Rolls-Royce makes big engines. They've been on airplanes that you've been on, okay? When a company buys, an airline buys an airframe from Boeing or Airbus, they then have to buy the engines. And the selling those engines is great. They're high technology. They have to run really well, highly repeatable, you can depend upon them to a great extent, something I value a lot since I fly so much, I promise you. So that's why this story may resonate most with me, because I have a personal stake in this. But that business kept getting pushed, and the margins were getting smaller and smaller, and it was tough competition, and it was high tech. And the CEO goes, I think our technologies are pretty much right at the leading edge, if not at the forefront. What is it we can do is to go understand how to solve this problem. And so they went, and when they looked very carefully, now this is the observation aspect is important. This is sort of the ethnographic or the anthropological approach of going and looking at what your customers do when they do whatever it is that you're supposed to be helping them with, delivering value. And they say, well, first, yeah, they buy the airframe, but then they say, okay, we're going to buy engines. They make a commitment to do that, and they arrange financing. They run a competition to select the engines. Obviously, that's the part that Rolls-Royce and others, Pratt & Whitney and others, contributed to. Then they buy a long-term operation and maintenance contract, because the engine's just part of the solution. You got to keep the thing up and running by regulation, but also just because it's the way engines work. Then you buy fuel, and since fuel prices are volatile, you have to hedge the price. And the CEO of Rolls-Royce said, we can do all of that. So they bundled it all together. They didn't change the technologies once, and they sold power by the hour. They sold a solution. Now, remember that, because I don't care whether you're in public sector or private sector, moving away from offering a prescriptive offering, a product or service, and trying to move to a solution set is one of the most powerful ways to innovate. And it often requires technology, but as you notice, it's not driven first by technology, even though you may start with technology. So there's the point. Business model and technology are the hearts. Now, you'll remember that, not remember, right in the center of that is customer insight. You need to be driven by a deep, deep understanding about what folks really value, need, use, et cetera. I watched an awful lot of pretty good ideas get launched that were not so wonderful because they never did this. Major financial institution on Monday, we're running a workshop, and they go, yeah, we just changed the way that we report to our customers, and half of them really didn't like it. And it's like, so this is an innovation. We obviously are doing something wrong. Management's wrong. And I'm going, well, wait a second. Did you prototype that and test it before you ever launched it to find out whether anyone was really going to sign up for it? And they go, well, no. Okay, well, then management may have a problem, but it isn't that they made a wrong decision, it's that you didn't give them the data that they needed. So that was a failed approach. It's just a personal experience I have. So sometimes when you peel back why things fail, which is something we do all the time, look for root causes, you often find that people did not test what it was they were offering. They didn't look at it from the standpoint of technology and business model, and they certainly didn't have the data. Remember experimentation? So there you go. By the way, we'll move faster through some of these, but laying the groundwork is important. Now, this one is interesting. This is a little counterintuitive to some folks. Innovation strategy links the business objective, and including there the business of government as well, and informs the selection of the operating model. Let me tell you what that means. First off, let me point out that this isn't something I sort of made up. Recent survey that we did, you mentioned, 79% of the top 20 innovation companies, because this was a private sector survey, we want to do a public sector one, 79% said of the leaders said that they have a well-defined strategy that they use to drive things forward. The laggards, not so much so. And something we find in Silicon Valley is the leading companies there are 4 times more likely to have a strategy that they use to drive their innovation. So there's something going on here. And here, this is part of the reason. Innovation strategy, right here, step number 2, is it takes what it is that you want to accomplish, your mission, ability to improve your mission or your goals as for growth. Its strategy says, how much innovation do we need? What types of innovation do we need? And where do we focus? Let me go through those again. How much innovation do we need? Remember I said to you I don't like to do innovation all of the time anywhere? One of the most fundamental questions you can ask is if we want to make changes, how much innovation do we need to make a change? Is this a small incremental change, or are we looking at something that's significantly different? Being honest about that and setting the strategy is very important. Usually there's not alignment in the room of decision makers around that point. Some people think more is better. Some people go, we're a little risk averse, let's keep it short. Unless there's alignment on that, you'll never be able to move forward. Now, and the other one is what types of innovation. I'll show you more on that in a second. But is it technology? Is it business model? Is it both? Is it incremental changes to what you have? Or is it, in fact, a major breakthrough that you're going to have? Getting alignment on that is very important because once you decide that, you can then say, well, how are we going to accomplish that? That's what operating model means here. It's just the engine that takes your strategy. It's your systematic approach towards exploration and innovation. So the strategy informs the approach you use. It does go back to how you innovate determines what you innovate. If you want breakthroughs, if you want whole new things, then you use a different approach than if you want small improvements. Or if you want a combination, you have an engine that has the ability to do both. So this is what happens here. Now, remember I said that innovation strategy is extremely important. I backed up on purpose because I was signaling I want to do a retrospective for a moment. Up until recently, this 10 years when innovation has started to change, companies basically had one approach towards innovation. I'm simplifying it, but I'm not far off. It was called traditional research and development. And it was stage gate or phase gate, if you like, and it was well-established way of moving forward and doing things. DARPA challenged it years ago, but everyone else was pretty much using the logical, what do we want to do, and you move it forward, and if it works, then it meets the criteria that you establish, and you fund the next phase, and you move it forward. It was a risk management tool. It was a very solid way, had high effectiveness, and basically it produced a lot of incremental innovation. It was very, very good at that. Now that we are focused more on major changes, fundamental shifts in the way that in the mission or in the ability to deliver against that mission or against growth, companies have invented new approaches towards it, the fast experimentation, et cetera, and I'll show you some of those in a moment. That means that you have to be thoughtful about what approach you're going to use, that you need a strategy because there are more choices than there used to be. Yes?
I don't want to get you off point, but at some point can you talk about, as part of your innovation strategy, whether you innovate or whether you acquire innovation? Somebody else has done it, you just buy the ideas. There's a lot of that going on in Silicon Valley right now.
Yep. I will do that in just a moment. That's a good point, because I might have blitzed right past that, but you can get innovation a lot of ways. I have been mostly talking about organic innovation. In fact, I've been talking exclusively, but let me come back to that. You need to understand that your innovation strategy can run the gamut from play to win, where you are basically going to build the basis for major changes that you want to undertake, and this will lead me to your acquisition, all the way down to the far end of the spectrum of play not to lose. Now, that's much more of a protect and maintain situation. I've used margins up here because that was the private sector basis for it. But protect and maintain is a very reasonable strategy for some parts of what you do. First off, you should not always try to innovate everywhere at the same level. So, for instance, in every part of your organization, to try and do play to win is probably not a good idea. Two reasons. One, you may not be able to do it. You may not be properly staffed or resourced. You may not have tools that are in place. But the other part is if you try to do everything at that end, you may find that you can't do anything well. In other words, it's the problem of spreading yourself too thin. So focus is extremely important. But the other part is that, play not to lose is oftentimes a very credible strategy if you decide to do it thoughtfully and for the right reasons. You may then, after a while, shift to a play to win or move up the spectrum, but it is reasonable, given where you are with your capabilities, with the other priorities you have, to say, we want to make sure that we don't lose out here. We'll follow, we'll be a player, but this is not a priority. Let's not slide. We can't let this slip. Maybe there's an opportunity we'll be able to take care of selectively, but we're not betting in the same way as we do in play to win. That is an important aha that many management teams have had recently, which is being thoughtful and selective about where you apply innovation is extremely important. Simply trying to do a blanket coverage and do everything innovative across all of your areas is probably not a good prescription for success. Very few have ever been able to do that, and no one has been able to sustain it. So, that's the first point. Now, if you, and this will get me in part to the acquisition issue. If you have a play to win a play not to lose strategy, you will tend to have a portfolio of heavily incremental innovations. That's let me make this better, faster, cheaper. Let me improve delivery against our mission, in a better way. Improve customer satisfaction or the like. Incremental innovations are massively important. You can't be there and expect to survive unless you're constantly making improvement. This was the sort of the Six Sigma or the high quality idea, which is let's get better at what we do. This was the operational excellence piece. Absolutely essential. Let me define the other pieces here, because as you move from play not to lose more to a play to win, you'll add parts to your portfolio. As you move to more of a play to win, you'll have more breakthrough innovation. Now, breakthrough innovations are changes in either the business model or primarily the business model or the technology, not exclusively. Anytime you change one, you probably change the other. For instance, software as a service was a major change against shrink-wrap software. And it was a business model change. I mean, the technology shifts were relatively minor. But it was the value delivered was still software. But the way it was delivered and the way it was monetized, for instance, just massive difference. So if you're in the IT business these days, you're seeing that. The cloud shift, also huge technology implications. But there's a lot of business model aspects as well. Some people are playing more technology innovation. Some are playing more business model. How will we use this, harness it, apply it, make it secure? A major challenge in many cases. It's certainly a concern. So breakthrough innovations are game changers. Maybe it's the same game, but you change the rules of it. Radical innovation. Oh, and let me give you I have to use very publicly available information, otherwise I get thwacked for even implying that I knew something about what a company is. Apple iPod was a technology breakthrough. Now, admittedly, it was an MP3 player, but it had huge amounts of software and design. No user experience had quite matched that. iTunes was a business model because no technology shifted, but you were able to legally download music that Napster had already done the first one, but missed the second aspect of that, the legal one. Those are examples of breakthrough innovation. But anytime you make a major change in the way something is done, it's a breakthrough. Radical innovation is when you change both at the same time and you're creating something brand new. Now, here's one of my favorite stories. Best example of that right now is going on in New Mexico. Virgin Galactic, part of the Virgin Empire, is going to be moving into space tourism. Now, they're using some neat technologies that were done in the X Prize. I'll come back to that in a second, where they proved that they could use advanced composites, an airplane lift, launch from the airplane, and do a small excursion into space and then bring it down. So the technologies are wildly new. But the business model's new because who owned the space business for years? The government or the military. Portion of the government, various parts of the government. We'll just leave it that way. Some of them have no names. Some of them are well designated, but it's all government. So now you have a shift. You're actually going to be taking people into orbit, and they're going to pay for it. That's a radical change. By the way, they've done some excellent marketing. They actually have something like 200 people signed up, or some large number, and it's like $250,000. So this is not cheap. And so the market segmentation they used identified that the people that are buying this are thrill-seeking millionaires. They've coined a new phrase, which is thrillionaires. So you can be innovative in your jargon as well if you're really good. And I thought wow, that's really amazing. X Prize. Now, there's a change in innovation. Running a competition. DARPA's borrowed that recently. But the X Prize was one of the first ones to do it. And then I looked at another change in the aviation space. I looked at Lindbergh flying across the Atlantic. And did you know he was chasing the Orteig Prize, which was set up to show that aviation could be used for commercial applications. And that was the beginning of commercial aviation, which takes us back to the Rolls-Royce story. I like to connect the dots every so often. But the reality is that we have found moments of innovation in the way we innovate along the way. This radical change, those happen very infrequently, but when they do, whole new areas are created, and in government as well as in the public sector. So one of the issues is, how do you get this innovation? What we find is that companies do incremental innovation mostly themselves. They can outsource it, they can contract, it's done, but it tends to be that way. Sometimes it's done with a partner, or they find a firm that's really good at it. Breakthrough innovations were the part that organizations were having trouble with, and they're doing more and more of it themselves. But there's also a feeling, particularly as you get into leading edge of breakthrough and into radical, that sometimes it's better to acquire it. Or even more importantly, to use corporate or venturing in order to invest in it, to create options to be able to do something. Cisco did this for years. A lot of companies in the Valley are doing it now, where you say there's some potential for something brand new in the IT space or in a business model or the like. we see that happening, but we already have identified someone who's out ahead. So an investment not only of money, but then working with them to use their technology in your own applications, to help them understand the customers better, to help grow them is a great way to do it. Ultimately, you can exercise the option and either acquire them or not, or license or the like. Some firms have depended upon acquisition as a way to do this, and it works pretty well. It's a bigger risk. The reason I mentioned the venturing side is that's a way of keeping the risks and the costs low, even though you may move to acquisition. It's a stage-wise process that manages the risk. But companies, organizations have found that acquisition is an integral part of what they do. But here's the caveat that comes with that. If all you do is acquire and you don't have a strong internal understanding of innovation, your acquisitions are diluted because the people will leave, because it's not a good place for the innovative folks to stay, or you won't be able to leverage the assets and the capabilities to the extent you could, because you still have to have internal processes. You may have it, you may own it, but you've got to be able to use it.
Is cultural change an important aspect of that?
Having a culture that is innovative is absolutely essential. I want to get to that, so thank you for asking, but hold on that a moment so I won't pause. I'll just keep going. So innovation, therefore, it has a strategy. There's some different strategies you can use. The different pieces are business model and technology, and there are levels of innovation. Now, usually companies, organizations have overbalanced their incremental innovation. They've tended to have a de facto play not to lose strategy. So many times an organization will say, we're going to get really innovative. And you go in a year later and you look, the portfolio is pretty much still incremental innovation. It's a clear sign that they don't have the culture change, the processes, the things that are necessary, which I'm going to get to in a second. So talking innovation is one thing, but making sure that you reflect your innovation strategy, your thought-out approach to how you're going to do it in order to meet your objectives, having a strategy that is exemplified in your portfolio is extremely important. I mentioned that there are a lot of new operating models for innovation. The one that is still a standard and true is traditional R&D. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because it's well understood. You can do it better. We're moving towards more agile approaches and all kinds of things that make it better. But, I mean, that one's been around a long time. But open innovation is interesting. Hank Chesbrough is the leading guru in that area at UC Berkeley. And what he did was realize early on that companies could do better, organizations in general could do better by opening innovation, not only across their own internal boundaries, but by reaching out to partners, collaborating with those outside the organization, which is sort of counterintuitive. The old approach was you get a lot of really smart people, you build a large wall around them, IP protection and all that kind of stuff, and you tend to do your own innovation. Open innovation said that you do far, far better when you are more porous and you have semi-permeable membranes so that you can work across with insiders and outsiders. I want to come back to that because you can use that approach in many different ways, and a lot of companies are finding it very useful. Design thinking is, IDEO is a major user of that, but it's Stanford Design School, D-School. It's all over the place. But this is the anthropological approach where you go study how people are doing things and identify the unmet needs, voice of the customer. There are various approaches you can use that get to the unmet need, the thing that really makes a difference, the solution, so to speak. Rolls-Royce did it by visiting the client. That used to be visiting the customer. It's a day in the life of the customer. Literally, teams would go out and study. Design thinking is using formally trained people to do that, and then to prototype. Reverse innovation and frugal innovation are also interesting approaches. I'm not sure that you're aware of this, but GE, for instance, had a heart monitor that sold for 6 figures, was used in the United States and in Europe, sophisticated, quite good. They tried to take it to India, and it didn't sell. It didn't fit. So they in fact, took a clean sheet of paper and said, let's redesign something that fits this particular application. This story is going someplace, so trust me, this is not just another India story. It comes home again here in a moment. And what they did was they used some of the same software, but they ruggedized it. They made it easy to carry in a bicycle, because that's where a lot of these things were done, carrying out to the countryside. The technicians at their level in India could use, and it sold like gangbusters. It was 5 figures. It was easy to do. People bought it. The healthcare facilities, it did very well. They then sold it in China. They sold it in Russia, a lot of great places. And then someone said, well, why don't we bring it back to the U.S.? Because we need lower cost healthcare, and these things are wildly expensive. They brought it, and it sold well here, too. They're in the name reverse innovation, or frugal sometimes, because the focus is on making sure it's not overly fancy, which is something we tend to do really well, and expensive. And that said, let's not do it. The other one that is good is Tata, an Indian company, realized there were millions of people that bought 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers, but never bought a car. So they've designed a car. It's taken them a while to get it right, but totally clean sheet of paper. They could not make a car cheap enough, but if they started with a clean sheet and redesigned it, they've come up with it. And Renault is now following their lead and moving in. These are millions of potential buyers. So sometimes starting over again is the best way to innovate. Co-creation is a close relative of open innovation. In that case, you actually get your customers to help you design your new innovation. Nike does this on their website. They have some of the most loyal, aggressive, interested, and involved customers, and they get them and they have them work and designing things, putting in their ideas, getting involved in designing. It's not just a focus group. I mean, they are part of the team, and they can use their web, their connection that way to do it very cost effectively. So they're not flying everyone around. They're actually just getting great information. They've changed from a company that relied primarily on big ticket name endorsements, the top athletes, they still do so, to a group of customers that have such passion and such involvement that they are able to, they've lowered their marketing and improved their hit rate on new products significantly. So it's not just a good idea, it's like they're data that make it work better. On the open innovation, and again, I'm going to data that's publicly available, Procter & Gamble did 97% of its new products from internal R&D. They spend heavily in that area, right there. They went to open innovation. They now quickly reached 50% of their product introductions came from combined internal, external. Their R&D costs went down and their success rate went up. I just throw these data in to make you realize that these aren't theoretical. We've got years of experience of people experimenting on how to do this better. Corporate venturing, I mentioned, an options way to move towards merger or acquisition. And then one that's getting a lot of attention, although the name's sort of misused, incubation, which is basically bringing a startup inside. Small, agile, really aggressive. I'm going to tell you more about that. But mixing and matching these is why you need an innovation strategy. Because if you don't have a strategy, you'll probably have this one, and you may grab a couple of the others, but they may not be best suited to what you're trying to do. Each of these has elements. Some companies are doing all of them. Some are doing 2 or 3. But there's a maturity, there's an evolution. Figuring out what you want to do. Incubation is a great way to do things, but it has to match your objectives. Same with co-creation. We good so far? Still there? Okay. Metrics and motivators drive behavior. Now, on this one, I want to take a slight departure. We were actually talking about this at lunch. This is part of the culture. One of the early things about what I really am talking about is behavior. Because if you alter behaviors and help people become more innovative, then ultimately it becomes part of the culture. Trying to just change culture is not easy to do and may not happen in your lifetime, but you can affect the way people behave. I'm going to show you some unnamed companies, examples of ways they do it right and ways they don't. Because I will tell you this. Great metrics have 3 components. Inputs, which are your leading indicators. Are you getting enough ideas? Are you getting enough? Are you using your partners well? Do you have a robust set of partners there? Do you have the systems in place? Are you funded adequately? So it's sort of like leading indicators, because if you're missing some of those, your system won't be as strong. Next is process. Are you running your rapid iteration prototyping fast enough? Are you moving projects forward at the right speed? Are you being focused? Is your portfolio matching what you said you wanted to accomplish? Process it. Outcomes. Did it work? Did you launch things that were successful? Companies have, I don't know if you know this, and it'd be interesting to consider what this would be in the public sector, something called the Vitality Index. Vitality Index is the amount of revenue coming from new products as a percentage. It's not the only message you can use, but it's a good way to sort of say, is it working? Okay? So just offer that as an example. Here's something that Leader Co. 1 and Leader Co. 2, unnamed companies that have done a pretty good job at this, and another company we'll call Struggle Co. that has had a tougher time of it. And if you look, they used a balanced scorecard. This is your inputs, your process, and your outcomes I just spoke of. Leader Co. 2 went a little more aggressively. They actually built it right into the KPIs all the way up to the CEO. Very interesting. It's like they not only got good metrics, they made sure it was in people's performance requirements. Talk about changing behavior. That'll do it. Struggle Co. didn't quite go that far. They had some pretty good metrics, but they stopped short. Now, that alone isn't the reason that they struggled. The results, Leader Co. 1 created an entrepreneurial culture. Now, I'm going to use this term again, so let me stop and describe it. Remember I talked about an incubator with being a startup inside? I live in the Valley, and I tell you that everyone thinks startups are great. Startups are out there. It's like 4 guys and gals, and you've got nothing. You got a great idea, and you're naked, and you need all of the entrepreneurial zeal just to make it day to day. Raising the money, doing the thing. It's just unbelievably how difficult it is. You want that same zeal inside of a company. You want to bring about that behavior. But you want someone who's an entrepreneur, who has entrepreneurial zeal and clock speed that can work inside of a large corporation or a large government organization, that is compatible, that knows how to leverage the assets, that knows what the customers, you can access, what the customers really need and want. Channels that a startup wouldn't have. So entrepreneur is a key phrase that you should walk away from all of this thinking about, because that's at the heart of success. It's this startup strengths combined with the larger organization. Now, where have I seen it go wrong? Well, we'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to whoops, I'm sorry, wrong button. Remember I was telling you about making the buttons big enough that someone could use who needs glasses. Adjusted metrics and motivators over time, so that if you have metrics, you don't have them forever. An innovation, as you mature, as you get better, you change them. As you find places where you need to make an improvement, you change the metrics to fit that. So you're agile enough in your innovation capabilities that you constantly are improving. If your metrics haven't changed in a year or so, you aren't paying attention to your performance adequately. The other one is then what happened over here. The metrics only focused on process and outcomes. They didn't look at the inputs, the sort of the foundation building that it takes. Were you training your people in innovation techniques, or did you just throw them in? If you don't train them, then it's hard to expect performance to improve. Your processes, your metrics need to mention that. And now, interesting one. Motivators, they create motivators that were tightly tied to the metrics. So if you're going to measure how fast your incubation is happening, your rapid prototyping and the like, then you had motivators that were, right there to reinforce it. One misconception, and it's heavily emphasized in the book, it was an aha from the research. People think that motivation for innovation is money. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it isn't a motivator. It is. The interesting thing is, it's particularly effective for incremental innovations. You make a good innovation, you get a spot award, you can get promoted, various things like that. It works. Breakthrough innovations that we're looking at here, the incubations and all that, there needs to be some monetary, fiscal, something that happens. Maybe it's just you get promoted, okay? It doesn't have to be an award. The biggest factor for motivation for breakthrough innovation is recognition. Breakthrough innovators want to change the world, and they want recognition that they helped do it in their agency or in their business unit or in their part of the world. Making sure they get that recognition is absolutely essential. If you want to stifle innovation, tell everyone to do it, but don't recognize the winners. Yeah.
You brought up something that I've been trying to figure out the best way to ask a question around this. It seems a lot of time with innovation, at least acceptance of it, the organization's in some sort of a pain, right? You don't have all the money you need, so you got to be innovative in the way you go about doing things.
Constraints are a great way to drive innovation,
The next example is there's in Saving Private Ryan towards the end, right? They're fighting the Germans. There's like 10 guys.
You are the only person in all of my 30 years of experience that ever used that as a metaphor, but please do go on.
Right. And so, clearly would they like all the weapons on all the personnel to find them? Yeah, they would, but they don't. So they have to figure out a way to use socks and stuff to innovate. And that's what I think is in terms of the pain.
And your question?
My question is, talk about that in terms of an organization accepting innovation, because there's been people who've innovated things in organizations where the organization said, nah, we can't do that. I'm
going to come to that one. It's a very, very key point. Absolutely essential. You're just a little ahead of me. Motivators to encourage smart risk taking. Here's what, if you grab someone from the outside, an entrepreneur, and you give them metrics that allow them to go just, only measure their ability to create new ideas, but not to be entrepreneurial, not to plug into the organization, what happens is you create these sort of feral innovators that suddenly don't work too well inside the organization. Alternately, if you set the metrics and the motivators in the wrong way, you can create very bland innovators. So pay great attention to this. It's one of the most important and most commonly overlooked elements of innovation. You need the process, you need the strategy, you got to have your operating models, but this is people. This is about people. And this is where you touch them, is in what you tell them you're going to measure, because they'll take that as this is what's important. And then how you motivate them when they, in fact, perform against it. It's absolutely essential. And I will get to that, so I haven't forgotten about it, but I want to focus. It's actually sort of the last point. Process often causes people's eyes to roll back in their head and they go, oh, talk about process. But it's decision rights, who gets to decide what. There's a tension between creativity and commercialization. You can have a wildly creative organization, but they have trouble taking it to reality. The value is not realized. Some, by the way, are really good at taking it to reality, but they have no ideas. So you've got to get that tension right. An innovation operating model has these elements, and these are the things that need to get balanced. Why are we doing this? We've already talked about that, sort of like what's the objective? That was number one. Sort of the innovation strategy and the portfolio mix. But you also need to look at the who. How are they organized? Did you have the A team? That's one of the biggest problems, is everyone's busy, so you just put whoever's not busy on the innovation team. Can you guess what happens when you do that? Yep. Partnership ecosystem, I mentioned to you that that's very important. I'll come back to that. Your ability to open, innovate, and leverage that. The how, what's your process, your culture, your behaviors, your metrics and motivators. At the center of that is governance and leadership. You need decision rights. Someone has to decide where you're going to invest. And if you do that at the wrong level, the wrong criteria, you'll make bad investment decisions. If you push down decisions too far in the organization, you may end up not getting the support you need from senior management. If you raise them too high for some decisions, you will, in fact, never get anything done because it moves too slowly. Remember, agile, fast. Collaboration. I want to come to that, and then we'll get to this issue of why things work and why some things don't in corporations. What we found when we took a look at these 1,757 different organizations is that the leaders were much better at collaboration. They made it a core competence. And this is sort of unusual. You think, oh, we just have to be good, can't fight amongst ourselves. But what they found was that the leaders actually reached outside and collaborated more. DARPA doesn't do it all themselves. They have a huge ecosystem of companies, startups, venture folks, organizations, universities that are their ecosystem. I'll use them as a tangible example, but I can point to lots of companies that do the same thing. The leaders have strategic partners, and spend a lot of time working with them, more so than the others. They work a lot with their customers too, co-creation or the like. Suppliers, academics, and sometimes even their competitors. This is obviously a private sector. But if they're moving into a new area, someone that they've not worked with because they were a competitor may make the perfect partner going forward. Breaking down the mental model that says we have to do it ourselves is important. In some cases you may acquire, but no matter what, you need to have extremely strong network, an ecosystem of partners that you work with. I like to say that whatever agency you're in, whatever business unit, there are 1 billion IQ points outside of your organization that you could tap into. If you do that, it's hugely advantageous. Now, not only do companies do that, but interestingly, they actually make it a core competency and they become what's known as partner of choice. They are the strongest magnet for great ideas. The iPod iTunes piece was not invented in Apple. Tony Fattle, who had been working in various companies and was then an independent consultant, walked into Apple and said, I think I've cracked how to do this. And he presented it. In 6 weeks, Apple assembled a team that included the MP3 player, the design for Apple did the software because that's their capability, and 5 others that did prototyping, 11 prototypes, and then chose the best one. Then in 6 months, finalized the design, were ready to go to manufacturing. Unbelievable rapid prototyping with a partnership that allowed them to do it. Powerful. And every organization we've seen that masters their ability to work with their partners, and again, I point to DARPA as just certainly one of the ones that wrote it, I know other countries are looking to try and mimic that. But companies have been doing it a long time. You learn a lot by being able to be the best in there. You become the magnet. You also become the one that has potential access to partners better. They'll join with you. They'll let you use their channel. They'll help you take your idea forward. That partnership is powerful not only at the ideation stage, but in the execution. And it's better, it's faster, and it's cheaper. Remember the Procter & Gamble? I use them because it's publicly available information, and they measure things every which way. So the numbers are extremely credible and believable. It absolutely mystifies everyone who's watching at how well this works. This collaboration piece is extremely important, and it's one of the ahas to come out in recent times. When people say, tell us where we can improve, one of the first diagnostics I do is on their strategy, which would make sense based on what I've said and the importance. The next one is on their ecosystem. How strong is it? Where are they in it? So as you're looking at your own operations, ask yourself, where are we with regards to the strength and our position in it? Leadership plays a pivotal role. That seems so obvious that you shouldn't have to say anything, but leadership, by the way, does a lot to set the stage. You asked before about where do ideas come from, great ideas. Leaders have to set the vision for why you want to innovate. Now, in some cases, there's a huge, massive organizational understanding that if we don't do this, this is the old burning platform, so fill in the blank, whatever is going to happen. But leadership is responsible for doing that. Some of the best changes have occurred not because the platform was burning, because it was sort of rotting and falling apart, and the leader said, we're going to make a change. And they led the change. But one of my pet peeves, because I've never seen it work, is a leader that says, bring me your innovations, I'll know a good one when I see one. Because what you'll get is just a massive amount of crap back. And I call it that because it's not what you want. It's probably not sufficient to meet the challenge that you were trying to meet. And it didn't stimulate real innovation. It was more of a, what can I think of that I could fix? And which is a fair thing to do, but you should have already done that. But if you're after innovation, the leader needs to say, these are the things we want to accomplish. This is our vision. And then have innovation stimulated in all the different operating model elements you choose. Leaders work both sides of the fence. Remember I mentioned there's an ambidextrousness? They are not only very good at operations, but they understand the logic of innovation, the strategy, the ecosystem, the processes, the operating model. They get it. These are things that they use in other parts of their operations. Why can't they use it here? And they do. They get it balanced. Predictability, stability, certainty, all those things that are true in operations can be balanced with the things that are true in innovation, even though they're not exactly the same. But it's what ambidextrous is all about. And this leads to both an operational culture and an innovation culture. So now, I mentioned the entrepreneurial thing. I've already talked about that. Entrepreneurs are, here's an important point. Entrepreneurs are good at ignorance management. Now, it's an interesting phrase when you stop and think about it. If you're trying to do something really new, a whole new way to deliver against the mission, a whole new iPod, iTunes, there's a lot you don't know. We have a saying in Silicon Valley, which is at least half of your great idea is wrong. And your job is to figure out what parts are wrong and fix it. Because otherwise you're going to have a really mediocre idea or a failure or both. And this has turned out to be true, which is why they rapidly prototype. Ignorance management says don't be cautious. Be fast and figure out what you don't know. Get the data. Get the discoveries. Live with this duality of data and discoveries. Embrace it, because that's the way you get through ignorance, is to figure out which things could kill you. If they're going to kill you, don't do them. If you can solve it, keep going. It sounds simplistic, but it's a different mode of operation. So now we get to the seventh point, which touches on yours at knock, knock. If you're, yeah, okay, good. He was doing his email. I had to rein him back in. Organizational antibodies are a reality in every organization. Good ideas get brought forward because vision of leadership, someone down in the depths sees it, a partner brings it to them from the ecosystem. The sources are multiform. But really great ideas, particularly ones that are major challenges to the way the organization works, cause a reaction that I used to think was a failure of the company or the organization. I now realize that every organization has organizational antibodies because there's a lot of really bogus ideas out there that come forward, and organizations tend to say, well, that's not worth doing. The trouble is organizational antibodies can't tell a good idea from a bad idea. So you have to anticipate that your best ideas and the people bringing them forward are going to be challenged all kinds of ways to Sunday by the organization. And many great ideas get killed off because of organizational antibodies. Choking at this point is inopportune, but I'll try to recover. You have to have strong leadership to fix this. You need some quick wins that prove that great ideas can make it through. You need, as I mentioned, leadership that can sponsor you through all of that. You need the right metrics and motivators. And what you really need is to realize that innovation is not always a meritocracy, that it's done inside of an organization. There are politics, there's turf issues and the like. And if you're trying to bring about change, you're going to need to work that. I love Art Fry's story. We all know Post-it notes. Art Fry invented Post-it notes. Got to know him when I was writing the book. Great thing, great guy. Art had these Post-it notes, and he could not get anyone to approve them inside of 3M. Ran multiple blind tests. You have to do that so that people would say, oh yeah, I get it. I want these. And then you hit a certain score, they commercialize it. No one could set up a test that would do that because no one had ever seen anything like this before, so all the tests came back quite bizarre. And he couldn't figure out how to do it. So Art went to the machine shop, had some run off, and then he went to all the executive assistants and he had them use them to the executives so that they would come walking out going, what's this thing? I've never seen this before. And they said, well, Art gave it to us. And so he created some air cover to get some special handling to run tests that hadn't been done before. And they finally got a test that gave them a sufficient score that they could launch it. And of course, what 3M said was, that's great. Can you make it a tape? You know, we can make Scotch tape. Can we do? And it's like, no. And I went, well, masking tape? No. It's Post-it notes, you know. So I just want to point out to you that there are a million ways that great ideas can get deflected or changed. You have to manage it with an eye towards being innovative about your innovation and understand that the leadership and keeping them informed, having them involved in key ways is absolutely essential. Art did it by little subterfuge. But without that, he never would have had the room to do it. Most companies are a little more formal in their approach in getting senior management buy-in. When IBM shifted to, they call them emerging business opportunities, one of the first incubators years ago, it answered to the vice chairman. Gerstner, we were there at the time, Gerstner put that in and said, this is important. He said, also, let's not use the B team, let's use the A team. And they changed things around. It was just 15, 20 years ago, just to point out that this is the kind of work that's been done. So, leaders know that innovation staves off death and decline, and increasingly they're embracing it and understand that you have to make changes. You need to make innovation part of your culture. You need to be ambidextrous. You need innovation because if you don't like to manage the experimentation and change that comes with it, you're not going to like the consequences. Not so subtle, but that's what happens. Eventually, you just sort of drift. Innovation is a management function of business and government. It's a management function. It's not something wild and crazy, although it does often include wonderful, wild, and crazy ideas that work. It requires rules, tools, and discipline. It also requires that you don't crush the creativity with too many rules or tools or discipline, but that's a balance that you can strike. Just like bureaucracy can manage risks, but bureaucracy has to make sure, that it doesn't slow things down. And innovation is a necessary ingredient for success. So changing the mindset from this is something we might need to have to something that we have to have this is absolutely essential. Leadership does that. The metrics, the process all reinforce that it will happen. Oops. Let me stop. I had a fun time. I think I may have gone a little too long because I totally lost track of the time. But, luck beats skill anytime. I wanted to open it up to questions and hopefully some answers. So thank you for the questions that came in. Did I answer your question reasonably well, or at least get started down that right pathway?
Yes, you did when you talked about the burning platform.
There you go. I like burning platforms, but sometimes it's better to have someone who goes, it's not burning, but we better fix it now. And that's a leadership function. And even in a burning platform, unless you want it to be just to look like a Keystone Cop movie, you really do need leadership in the burning platform. And that's been proven because we've seen companies that scrambled like crazy but never quite regained, and organizations as well that never regained things. Any other questions? Yes.
We're using, in my company for products, we're using like an agile/lean startup approach, and we've got a lot of...
Let me interrupt. Agile and lean and rapid prototyping all are roughly in the same area. Agile tends to be just a software, but people are now applying it across the board. So I think when I was talking about rapid prototyping and everything, that's the kind of stuff I'm thinking.
So we've got, we always have great ideas coming in from our customer base and the company. Now it's going to strategic partners, so you definitely
opened your eyes there.
Yeah. So so we do the user stories, we do the hypothesis, we look at the measures, we look at behaviors of our customers and stuff like that. But when you're figuring out your priority of what you're going to do, and this is probably more in the incremental innovation, I would say, than breakthrough. Any recommendations on your kind of how you're making those decisions, those priority decisions? I mean, we're kind of doing them all around goals and objectives.
Well, it's a big topic, but first off, the customer insights are the most valuable. You need to tie it to a clear benefit to those that are receiving whatever it is you're doing, or the things that you're doing, as opposed to intellectual exercise and ranking and things like that. So that's why the testing of things and getting data is really important, because then it's no longer arguing whether it ought to be blue or black. Yeah, it's like people like blue more, there's some data. Or maybe we ought to make both, but that's the first point. The second is a little counterintuitive. My experience is that companies are so enthralled with incremental innovation, they do way too much of it. And the reason that's a problem, because I think improving what you have is great, but the reason it's a problem is you've got this thing called resources, and you almost always will exceed your resources' ability to do the amount of work you're giving them if you just keep expanding the amount of incremental innovation. We ran across a situation, and this is a common problem. I don't know that it's true for you or what you're describing, but a careful look at your pipeline and your resource allocation and finding out if people are working multiple projects at the same time, you may not be optimizing your ability to, one, make good decisions, and two, speed them forward so that you can get to the next new thing. We had a case where one client was really good at breakthrough innovation, but it was stalled. Just wasn't going anywhere. Good ideas in there, rich portfolio. They'd used the strategy, they had good selection criteria. It just wasn't going. So we did something bold. We took half the projects. It was roughly half. It may have been 45%. We froze them. We didn't try to kill them. We just said, look, let's just move those off. And what we found was the remaining projects, which were really good, just like maybe the other ones, they moved through the pipeline at twice the speed, and the commercialization success went up. They moved faster, they made better decisions along the way. You can dilute your innovation capabilities by not focusing. One of the biggest lessons is to say no, a lot. I even had one client who was so bad at it that they made it one of their metrics. How many projects did they kill? Now, I thought it was sort of perverse, but it was trying to overcome a very bad behavior where they said yes to just about everything. And they didn't kill it later on. Oftentimes you'll find that projects overlap or you're draining resources and not going after the best one. So being very vigilant about what criteria you use, again, the customer input is the best, and then making really clear that you're focused on enough things but not too many is key. Steve Jobs, when he came back, again, it's deep public information, as opposed to he lives around the corner, or he lived around the corner and he used to tell me these things, which is not true. He didn't tell me these things. But when he came back after his hiatus, when he went away, he got thrown out by the board and he came back, one of the first things he did, they had all of these projects going on. And he just said, look, we've got 4 product areas we're going after. That was even in the movie. And lo and behold, he goes, that's all. We're going to focus on it. And I want, just massive amounts of energy around these 4 product areas. They had 16 other projects under, they're gone. And it did an amazing amount to revitalize. Now, over time, I think they've built it back up again, but they did it consistent with their resources. They still, however, are one of the most leanly resourced organizations if you look at revenue, if you look at number of products and the like. So I don't want to beat it to death, but pay attention to how much you're trying to do as well as what you're trying to do. Because the two go to, remember, how you innovate determines what you innovate. If you've got a congested pipeline, your outputs may reflect that badly. It's not just a case of you'll just be a little slower. You may actually be making bad outputs because of that. And all of this is done without any idea about what it is you do. So, yes.
Have you talked just a little bit about the data you need about your business to make to come up with these good ideas? I mean, in government, one of my observations in working a lot with government is they don't have a lot of data about what things cost and performance metrics in terms of they're running their business. And it seems to me that's critical to really understand what makes a good idea and what doesn't, how you evaluate these ideas. Can you just talk, maybe this is more incremental, but it might affect the other levels, like what kind of data companies use to understand their business and analyze it and decide on how to make changes?
Well, data are very useful, and some companies are really big into data mining. I like the story about the gold mining company that gave out all of its maps and everything else to just the wide community of data wonks and asked them to find where the gold was hidden. And the community actually identified several major new deposits that the company had never seen. So one, data is wonderful. And two, sometimes it's better to partner to help take a fresh look and the like. But, the lack of data, if you don't have data, you need to make it up. Now, I'm not talking about synthesizing it out of nothing. I mean, you need to go make it present. So if government doesn't have some of that, well, go get the best data you can. I emphasize quick and dirty because if you don't have any, then pretty much any you get is better than what you had to begin with. What I hate are theoretical discussions about, well, this could do this or this could do it. Well, I've been involved in those, and sometimes you have to. But it'd be even better to know, we ran that by 25 people that we consider valuable insights. It's not that, but But the indication was, let's go this way. That's a preferred path, okay? Then you'll go forward and you'll test it. You might zigzag before it's all over. So this idea of getting data if you don't have it is important. But let me also say, you probably in government are sitting on lots of data. It's just, is it in the form that you can use it to make decisions? I'm guessing from my experience there that that's part of the issue. So when you say there aren't information about costs, well, you could probably back into some costs, at least, using some rules of thumb. How much does it cost to manage the files for such and such? Well, there's a lot of IT data points that you can use. It doesn't have to be your own, but if you all spend X in IT, well, then you can sort of take some pieces and go, well, we're probably spending about this much. Part of innovation, though, should be about getting better data, actually better insights. And sometimes that's mining the data. Sometimes that's going and getting new data. And again, I'm emphasizing sometimes it's better to just go take a fresh look at it. Incremental, you use whatever exists. But particularly if there's a breakthrough, you need to maybe go find some new data. That's the Edison story. Go try something. See what you learn. Other questions? Yes?
Do you have any insights into the comparison and investment of resources between the leaders and the laggards?
Oh, yeah, great question.
And then follow on to that, are there also any differences between product companies versus services organizations?
Ooh, rich topic. So let me go to the second one first. There used to be huge differences between product and service companies, and that's blurring. You got product companies like Rolls-Royce bundling services in there. You've got people adding services to all kinds of things that were traditionally products. You've got service companies like Amazon creating products like Kindle. And so one of my points is just you're starting to see that blur. And also, there are no products that are sold absent of services. Someone's providing services, maybe not the organization that's selling the products. And the same thing is true for the services. There are some products in there someplace, okay? So it used to be that there were big differences, and I worked in the area. We had sort of separate approaches. That's pretty much all getting blurred. And in fact, some of the business model changes I've been talking about have really blurred the distinction between products and services. It's like hardware, software. It's like everyone's doing hardware and software today, so the analogy roughly holds. So there are differences. Service companies tend to be more focused on, they have a strong IT backbone usually, but they have a lot of business model innovation going on these days. The value, the way you deliver it, the way you monetize it. Product companies tended to be more on the technology side, but they're moving heavily over towards the business model side because they realize that it's a source of huge advantage. Organizations in general are rethinking their mission, their charter, and new ways to deliver. So that's the first point. The second one is, I should have put it up here just because it would have been startling to you. You thought ignorance management was startling when I put that up. Let me give you another one. There's no statistical correlation, and I'm speaking of companies now because that's the only place I have data, no statistical correlation between performance and spend. The amount of money that companies spend. If you can go spend too little. I mean, there's a point at which if you're in the last decile of spend, you probably are starving your organization. But up above that threshold, it's not how much you spend, it's how you spend it. It's your operational model, is your strategy. We find that this strategy alignment with the operational model is one of the greatest determinants of success relative to the spend. It's not how much. Now that's counterintuitive. But remember, some of these new ways of doing things are faster, better, and cheaper than the old approaches. When Procter, again, the data I threw, Procter shifted to a highly collaborative open innovation ecosystem, their costs went down. So, what we're finding is that we've challenged some of the basic tenets of spend. Now, some of my compatriots inside the PwC they flinch when I say this because they want to say, look, we should help folks. Maybe they need to spend a little more. Look, you can always, if you spend your money wisely, you can do better. But I want to disavail you of this idea that there's really any strength in the amount spent. It really has a lot more to do with how good you are at spending it and getting the results you want, the metric, all of the things I've talked about. And that was one of the big ahas. Now, that's true in making innovation work. But we have data now over 10 years where we've surveyed the R&D spend and the innovation spend across 1,000 companies. Again, I have private sector kind of information. I don't have public. And there's no correlation. That's a startling point, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you'll remember that one from today, if nothing else. Maybe ignorance management as well. Ed, go ahead.
So your data is private sector.
Yeah.
You've provided tremendous information about that. And this may be sort of getting into some of those discussions we'll be having.
Yeah.
Based on your experience, knowing what you know about how the public sector operates, would you draw parallels or contrasts? Were there more parallels or more contrasts in terms of applying this model in a public sector environment where profit motive is different, et cetera?
The model works. And why do I know that? Because I've seen examples of it. Works in both sectors. Okay. The fact that I use private sector and there's growth and margins and profitability, don't let that, that's just the way they measure success. But if you measure, your mission and your ability to deliver on it, these things work just as well. Now, admittedly, there are differences in resourcing and structure and organization and governance, the decision rights and all of that. I understand. But where companies, organizations, and I choose Dartmouth just because it's such a clear and publicly available story, where they've challenged and have done things differently and used so the ecosystem effectively, more of an incubator approach, which is what they've been doing. It's been very effective, and it shows up in lots of places. So I can say to you that there are enough data around public sector applications of this to say that it works. Some differences, but by the way, there are differences when you remember Leader Co. 1 and Leader Co. 2. There are always some differences in the way that you actually apply the metrics or the decision rights or the organization, because cultures are different and size of the organization matters, their maturity, level of maturity around innovation. So I'm not suggesting it's a cookie cutter, but the basic premise of the operating model, having a clear strategy that says why you're doing innovation, how much you need, how you're going to use innovation to meet your goals. Those elements are absolutely applicable. And I would say from education to the full spectrum, healthcare and the like. And by the way, to that point and to yours about services and the like, there were groups 5 years ago that were just not active in innovation. Up in financial services, well, unless you consider derivatives and rebundling risk, good innovation, which I think we all agree didn't work so well. But Volcker once quipped that the only innovation you've seen in financial services was the ETF. But there are places that have been, and utilities, highly regulated, right? Up to here. Pharmaceutical. These are areas now where we're seeing huge, healthcare. How could I forget? Private payers, providers, med tech companies, etc. These are areas where there's a huge amount of change going on in innovation. They are now embracing this. So sometimes when you take a look at something, your own organization, parts of government, all of government, if you're in a particularly down mood, and say, I'm going to have trouble doing it here. Remember that there are many organizations that haven't been that innovative that are stepping up to the challenge now and are finding that success is happening. They are making the changes. Metrics, motivators, strategy that makes it clear, picking the right operating model, getting an entrepreneurial approach. So, I'm not trying, this isn't a pep talk, but what I'm trying to say is if you take a look at recent history and say, we haven't been that innovative, that's not necessarily a predictor of what you can do. There are lots of examples of companies, of organizations that have made the transition. Any other questions? Yeah.
You talked about the 7 different sources of innovation beyond traditional R&D, and how you need to have strategy to pick which ones.
Yeah, right.
Have you found in your research that there's sort of a sweet spot in the number of different sources that you're mixing and matching? And then, knowing what you know about public sector, are there ones on that circle that you would suggest agencies start with?
I haven't found a sweet spot to answer your question. I've seen companies. In fact, some of my compatriots go, can't we say what the pathway is? You go to incubator first, and then you corporate venture, and I go, I've seen them start with open innovation and go to frugal, and there's no single pathway that does it. So I don't, maybe in a little time I will see data that will tell me that.
And by sweet spot, I mean whether agencies choose to use 4 or 2.
Right, and I'm saying some start with, usually they start with 1, and then quickly add, or sometimes add more. If you've only got R&D, if you only got basic approach and it's incremental, start with 1. Just learn to do this well, and then it's sort of a virus. It will replicate. You'll be able to do more. So start small. Remember, prototype. Use prototyping to grow your innovation capabilities. Start, get good, find a place where it works, make it happen, drive it forward, be successful, learn how to do it, and then replicate it. That's the right way to do it. And your second question was?
Just of those options.
Which one I would say to government? No, it depends. I have biases. I happen to think that the open innovation, the ecosystem, the collaboration is extremely powerful, and it actually combines with any of the other models. So it's not like you choose that one. You should have that though. And one of the things that's amazing is most organizations I deal with think they're really good at collaboration. And I got to tell you, it's not so much the case, either internally or particularly externally. One of the things I run across always is, we're going to collaborate. And I go, well, you got this 52-page NDA that we've got to get folks to sign. I go, man, you're not going to get any really savvy startups to come through that particular hole and make it through. The organizations that deal with partners are often sort of in a vendor mode. We treat you like a vendor. It's like, and you don't trust us? Yeah, there's asymmetric risk sharing too. It's like, I'm taking no risk, you take it all. You're my vendor, I want you to take it all. And the auto industry has done that, killed innovation to a great extent. Because how can you have any partnering if it's all, I get all the benefit, you take all the risk. That doesn't work. So I do think that the collaboration is important. I have a feeling there is one common element. It shows up as an incubator, that's the way I carry. But this idea of testing, doing things really small and learning is sort of common across all of them. So whether you call it an incubator, whether you call it design thinking, whether you call it co-creation, a common element is do things really small, and really fast. The Dyson vacuum cleaner? This is one of my favorite benchmarks. Great thing. Came out of nowhere. It's captured a huge market share, 50% in some places, overnight. Vacuum cleaning was pretty moribund, kind of. Everyone had one, but no one spent much time talking about it. It's like, hey, did I tell you about my new vacuum cleaner? Once a bunch of conversation started. But Dyson came out, and all of a sudden it is. They did 5,721 prototypes before they launched. Now, I think that they're maniacal. I think that's just way too many, but that gives you an idea. They were after the very, very best. And Dyson drove his team. He didn't do them all himself. It's not like he's Edison sitting in his lab. He had a team. And he drove them to test the business model, the design features, the color, the plastics, the technology itself, the magless approach. So I use that as an example. Is if you think you're good at doing things quick and fast, there are some benchmarks out there that will challenge you and give you some new ways to think about this. So I guess the answer is, whatever you do, have a good ecosystem and find ways to do the small tests that can grow data and discoveries along the way. And so you may call it an incubator. You might call it design thinking. Less important what you call it, but those are two of the essential ingredients. Yeah?
Hey, Rob. I think that when you start comparing private sector and at least the federal government, there is a difference in terms of the way the model shapes itself from the very top. You don't necessarily have the leadership or even the champion teams running around there empowered to make a lot of these changes. And the motivation is also very different. So I think when people come to you and say, well, what's the formula? I would I would tend to think that organization and how the agency's mission is arrayed, how it's organized, and how people inside are motivated does play a big role, at least in the public sector. So in your research, have you seen that there are some organizational models that when you look at their mission and the way the leadership is arrayed, organization plays a bigger role or a less role? Are there some indicators there?
Nothing that stands out. I mean, I get your point. Yeah, you can stifle innovation by the organization, but boy, I bump across a lot of private sector companies that sound an awful lot like what you were just describing. So, and they're struggling, and it's not because they don't care, it's because they can't find a way out of, well, how do we organize? The organization piece is very, very important because that matters. I didn't really spend a lot of time on organization, but what I found is that while there are a lot of ways to stifle it, that mostly the idea is don't create something big and huge and whatever. Again, it's just sort of start small and get going and learn how to do it, and then create that, because it's just inexpensive, low visibility way to make progress, which again is a great way to make progress. It's cheap, it's fast. If it doesn't work right away, you didn't embarrass yourself or anyone else. But I hear you about there being organizational problems. I guess what you need is someone at a reasonable leadership level. It doesn't have to be the top person in the agency, but someone to say, we're going to use an incubation approach, and we're going to set up partners, and we're going to work in a new way to go accomplish these things. And with that, there's usually room to be able to make something happen. Again, you don't have to change the compensation structure or anything. You might have some recognition and reward ceremonies or some things like that. One company I worked with that was really good had a theme which was the small acorn is what grows the mighty oak. So people that were good at innovation, that had successes, got small acorns that they put on their desk, and it became a badge of honor. Very interesting, highly motivated. I mean, the people that had 5 acorns, it's like, sent a strong signal, and sort of people wanted acorns. And how do you get acorns? I mean, that may sound trivial, but remember I went back to metrics and motivators? You can do an amazing amount. And let me tell you something you didn't ask, but I hear it all of the time. What?
I just was saying to Martha, you may see that.
The acorn piece. Yeah, it was a brilliant idea. The company went belly. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I often hear this, and I didn't hear it here. I'm not sure we've got the people in my organization that are, and so you were thinking this, I know, that are necessarily the right ones. Well, let me tell you. There are some, but first off, I happen to believe that people are inherently innovative. Some more than others, some in different ways. Some are great team players, some are the brilliant in the shower, aha kinds of folks. But innovation is a team sport, so you need all of them. Some are better at execution of really great ideas that the innovator, the thought provoker didn't think of, et cetera, et cetera. There's multiple forms. But first off, let's go back to where I started. Operational excellence is what companies have been good at. Now, you're in a company, organization. Everyone is measured and promoted based on how well they do the task at hand. Would you want to necessarily stand up and show your entrepreneurial skills in that environment? Either you've left or you're hunkered down and you're not showing any of that because you don't want it. So one, there are at least a small percentage of one fellow in Silicon Valley, he said it's 12%. It's like, I have no idea where he pulled that number from, but he has, through years of experience, said there are a small number, I would put it somewhere in 20%, that are actually pretty good in innovation if you give them the right process, motivation, leadership, mitigate the organizational antibodies and the like. So you actually have them, they're just hidden. So when we talk about how do you get going, you gotta find them and bring them in. And usually what happens is they've been waiting for someone to knock on their door. You may eventually have to hire, you may eventually need to train others, but there are starting resources that can help you overcome what appears to be an organization that's bereft of innovation.
One last comment, in a prior life, when we were struggling with how to get innovation back into the government, this is the IC, we created InQtel, and we took the very bright and the very brightest, and we set up a separate fund to actually help the intelligence community. And then IARPA was a model after DARPA. And the reason that was done on both occasions was to actually take really motivated individuals and put them in an organization where they felt free. And they had a champion that could cover for them.
Right.
He actually committed. And the only reason I bring that up is because I think even in the private sector, sometimes you need to pull some of the folks in an organization aside so you can create that incubation. But as a former Fed, I think that sometimes in the government that helps a lot because you need that champion to say, we're going to watch over you and be creative. It's a different motivation that maybe from
it's true in all organizations, just like there are organizational antibodies in all organizations. That's true. Let me just offer one other piece, and we're going to move to a workshop, which I think you'll find provocative. And if nothing else, you get to try some of these ideas out amongst you. There's often a feeling that this incubation or this small group, this entrepreneurial group, ought to be a skunk works, because that was actually Lockheed's thing out in Silicon Valley and U2 and all these things came from. There are very few success stories around skunk works where you totally removed everyone and just isolated them. There was an example of one that didn't work that's known as Xerox PARC, Palo Alto Research Center. It's right there. I lived through it. And while they are still around and have done reasonably well, over a period of time, they came up with brilliant ideas that the folks in the East Coast thought were the craziest things they had ever heard of. And while they licensed them, they never commercialized any of them because they were a copier company. And this had to do with networking inside the office and computers hooked up and email and LANs and all this stuff. The companies that took those licenses have twice the market cap of Xerox today. It's a case study. Hank Chesbrough, by the way, studied that and sort of said, aha, one of the problems is companies often defeat themselves. So the reason I mention that is isolation is not what you want. What you want is insulation. You want a group of smart folks that are insulated from the day-to-day and have enough freedom that they can really be innovative. But you don't want them isolated. You want them to be part of the team. Otherwise, the ideas come across as alien, and you should see the organizational antibodies. I walked into one company, and not only was the idea that had been advanced being attacked massively, I mean, the chairman was calling into question, but the individuals and the whole innovation organization was about to get challenged right out of existence because they had mismanaged that so bad. So just that was you sparked something that it's like I would have done a misservice if I sent you all out and set something off all to the side. That's not what's supposed to happen. We're going to have another question, then we're going to go to the workshop.
Is your use of the word insulation there a code word for removing bureaucracy?
More. The code word is more heavily loaded than that. They need to not have bureaucracy related to day-to-day activities. They need to be free of that in order to achieve the goal. The small group should be self-organized and not have processes that. But part of it is they just need to not necessarily be held accountable to the same periodic assessments or reviews. It's sort of like take them out of the normal flow.
I think that was one of the big keys in Lockheed Martin's skunk work.
That they did take them out, or
that they got away from bureaucracy.
Yeah, that was what they wanted to avoid. They did that well. And in their case, what they developed worked. I'm telling you that if you're trying to do that and bring it back in to your organization, while you wanted to avoid the bureaucracy, you may have created an unintended consequence. So they solved one problem, and in their case, they made it work. But getting it integrated back into the organization, that's where you run into problems if you're isolated. So insulated is better than isolated. By the way, if you told me that the organizational antibodies would kill off anything we did at all, I'd say, well, isolated. Yeah, start there. At least you have a chance of doing something. But general practice is insulated is better.